In this lecture, we are going to talk about random variables. This lecture is a part of our course on discrete random variables and probability distributions. If you want to learn this topic in a step-by-step and detailed manner, then you may check the description of this video to get the access link to our full course. All that said, let's get started with random variables. Let's take an example to start with. Let's say we flip two balanced coins. So these are the four possible outcomes that we can have. Heads on the first coin and heads on the second coin. In short, we can call this HH. Heads on the first coin and tails on the second coin. In short, we can call this outcome HT. Similarly, the next outcome is TH and the last possible outcome is TT. Now, note that the outcomes of this experiment are qualitative in nature. They are not numbers. And we know that while doing statistical analysis, we need numbers so that we could analyze the numerical aspects of the data. So basically, we have to define a rule that will give us a numerical value corresponding to each of these possible outcomes, and then we can use those numerical values to do the statistical analysis. Also, note that the kind of rule we are going to define depends on what we want to analyze. That was a lot of talking. Let's continue with our example to understand this step by step. Let's say we are interested in the number of heads. So in this case, we can define our rule of association as number of heads that we get. Now, if we follow this rule, then the first outcome will correspond to a numerical value of 2 because there are 2 heads in this outcome. Similarly, the second outcome will correspond to a numerical value of 1. The third outcome will also correspond to a numerical value of 1, and the fourth outcome will correspond to a numerical value of 0, as there are no heads in this outcome. And this rule of association that we have applied here to associate each outcome of this experiment with a number is what we call a random variable. So the random variable in this example is the number of heads. Okay? Now let me write all this in a formal manner. So this is our experiment, flip two balanced coins. These are the possible outcomes HH, HT, TH and TT. Our random variable is the number of heads and the possible values that our random variable can take are 0, 1 and 2. Okay. Now let's talk about some notations. Generally we denote the random variables by uppercase letters. So it could be capital X, capital Y and so on. And we use the lowercase letters to represent some particular value of the corresponding random variable. So in our example, capital X is the random variable. It represents the number of heads and small x can be equal to 0, 1 or 2 depending on the outcome. I hope this much is clear. Let's take one more example. Let's say we roll 2 dice and this is how we are describing the possible outcomes. Here the first number is the number on the first die and the second number is the number on the second die. So there are 36 possible outcomes in total. Note that here the outcomes are already numerical in nature. These are numbers. But let's say we are not interested in these numbers in this form. What we are interested in is the sum total of the 2 dice. So based on our interest, let's define our random variable as follows. Here x is the random variable and it represents the sum of the 2 dice. Using this rule of association, we can see that the outcome 1, 1 corresponds to a numerical value of 2. The outcome 2, 1 corresponds to a numerical value of 3 and so on. In short, these are the numerical values corresponding to each of these outcomes. As you can see, our random variable x can take values from 2 to 12. The minimum value of the random variable x is 2 and it corresponds to the outcome 1, 1 and the maximum value that x can take is 12 and it corresponds to the outcome 6, 6. I hope these two examples have given you at least some idea about random variables. You will get much more comfortable with the concept of random variables as we proceed further. In our next lecture, we will discuss the types of random variables.